It's English o'clock. Welcome to our English class. Today, we will continue exploring the elements of a short story. Can you still recall what is a short story? To review, short story is a short work of fiction that can be read in one sitting. So that means you can finish it in one go. Pretty convenient, right? Also, it has few characters, limited settings, and one main problem. It also has a lesson for us. So, to easily remember our elements of a short story, we can say kasepkot. It stands for characters, setting, plot, conflict, and theme. That's our magic word for remembering the 5 elements. Let's go through them quickly. Characters, these are the people, animals, or thing that takes the action in the story. Followed by setting, the time and place where the story happens. Next is plot, the sequence of events, what happens first up until to the last. Next is conflict, the problem or struggle. And finally, the message or lesson we can learn. That is the theme. Now, for our lesson, we will focus on conflict. Who can tell me what the word conflict means? Is it a fight? A problem? A challenge? Yes, you're right. It's all of those. Conflict is a struggle, challenge, or problem faced by a person or people. And without conflict, a story would be boring. We need problems to make it more exciting. Okay? Now, we have 2 main types of conflict. Say it with me, internal and external. For internal conflict, it happens inside the person. It is the opposition coming from within. It also involves moral and values. It is like when your heart and your mind disagree. Should I do the right thing or what's easy? For example, during recess, Anna found a 1,000 peso bill on her classroom and didn't know if she should tell the teacher or keep it. What do you think, class? What should Anna do? Yes, Anna should tell the teacher because that is the right thing to do. We should not take what is not ours. You have to always find ways how to give it back to the real owner. And that is an example of internal conflict, or in other words, man versus himself. A battle inside our conscience. Do you understand, class? Alright, now let us move forward to the second type of conflict, which is external conflict. It happens outside the person. It's the opposition between an individual and some outside force. It has 4 types. The first one is man versus man. This is where characters are in direct opposition to each other. 2 people fight or argue. That is man versus man. For example, Jake clenched his fist as he faced off against his former best friend, determined to settle the argument once and for all. So in this case, Jake is mad to his best friend and he wanted to punch his best friend's face. That is an example of man versus man. Another example is Liam and Noah shouted at each other in the school hallway, both blaming the other for losing the contest. So they're having an argument that they shouted and blamed at each other. Okay, so that is an example of man versus man as well. The next is man versus nature. This is when characters face natural forces like earthquakes or wild animals. For example, in 2025, a strong earthquake shook Davao City early in the morning, causing walls to crack and furniture to fall. Raphael quickly ducked, covered, and held under the table, while the ground continued to shake. Earthquakes can't be detected by any device, and we cannot control it. However, with proper preparation, we can survive this natural disaster. One way of preparing for a natural disaster is preparing or having your own go bag. What is inside a go bag? First, it must have your basic needs like bottled water good for 3 days, canned good, biscuits, your first aid kits, your medicines, also emergency items like flashlight, batteries, whistles, and your personal items such as clothes, blanket, face mask, toothbrush, toothpaste. You also have to put your important documents in a waterproof envelope. Those are identification cards, birth certificates, emergency contact list. Okay? Another example of man versus nature is when, while hiking in the forest near Mount Apo, Carlo froze when a wild boar suddenly appeared on the trail, blocking his way. What do you think Carlo felt at that moment? Scared, right? He didn't expect to face a wild animal while he was hiking. So this situation shows how people sometimes struggle against nature's creatures or forces. So if you were Carlo, what would you do? Would you run? Would you stay still, or would you slowly move away? That is a tricky situation and the perfect example of how unpredictable nature can be. Okay? Next, let us talk about man versus society. So this happens when someone stands up against unfair treatment or beliefs. Okay? So racism, segregation, religious beliefs, environmental issue, or being wrongly accused of something is an example of man versus society. Okay? So I have here an example, racism. It happens when someone is treated unfairly or looked down on just because of their skin color, race, or where they came from. It's when people think that they are better than the others just because they look different. And that is not right. We have to always choose kindness, respect, and equality. Also, some people cut down trees without permission. That is what we call illegal logging. When trees are gone, the soil becomes weak. When it rains, floods and landslides happen. Imagine losing your home because of something that could have been prevented. Okay, so we have an example here. When Ella discovered that the government spent millions on a fake flood control project in her town, she spoke out even though many people warned her to stay silent. What Ella did was a brave act. Just because you're comfortable doesn't mean you won't fight for the taxes that was stolen. Remember, staying silent only empowers the oppressor and never the victim. And that is an example of man versus society. Another example is, despite being teased by his classmate for speaking in his native language, Bisaya, Marco continued to be proud of his culture and identity. So Marco, instead of feeling ashamed, he stands tall and smiles. He knows that speaking in his language, which is Bisaya, is part of who he is, his culture and identity. Class, remember this. Never make fun of someone because of their language or accent. Each dialect and culture makes our country beautifully diverse. So be like Marco, be proud of who you are, and be respectful of others too. Lastly, we have man versus technology. This is the battle against technology that has become too powerful. So this happens when we rely too much on gadgets or when machines fail us. For example, after relying too much on translation app, Jessa struggled to write her English essay without any digital help. That is a big problem. And this is where she realized that depending too much on technology can make us forget how to think and write on our own. So, remember, technology is helpful. There is no problem with it. It makes our lives easier. But your own knowledge and practice are even more powerful. Another example is Paulo stayed up all night playing online games on his phone. And the next day, he failed his quiz because he couldn't focus. This reminds us that too much screen time can affect our studies and health. Games can be fun. There's nothing wrong with it. But knowing when to stop shows discipline and self-control. Okay, so that would be our lesson for today. Now, let's have a quick recap. Again, conflict is a struggle, challenge, or problem faced by a person, and it has two types: internal and external conflict. Internal conflict happens inside the person, while external conflict happens outside the person. It has four types: man versus man, man versus nature, man versus society, and man versus technology. So, do you have any questions? If not, let us have an activity. For our activity, you're going to choose which of the following conflict best describe each situation. For number one night, Martha decided to stay out late with her friends even though her parents had to set a curfew. When she got home, her parents were waiting and clearly upset. Which conflict example is this? Correct. This is an example of man versus man. Martha wanted more freedom, but her parents wanted to keep her safe. So sometimes our personal choices can clash with rules or authority figures, like in these examples, our parents. And this could lead to conflict or consequences. No? How do you think Martha felt in that moment? Were you also upset when this happens to you? Well, that's valid, but remember, our parents just wants us to be safe, okay? So, next, number 2. Lisa's family had to evacuate their home when Mount Mayon began erupting, sending ash and lava down the slope. Which conflict example is this? Okay, correct. This is a man versus nature. So, Lisa feels scared, but she knows they have to be brave and follow safety instruction. This is an example of how people struggle to survive against powerful forces of nature. Alright, you're doing great, class. Let us have number 3. Miguel wanted to join the speech contest, but he kept doubting himself and wondering if he was good enough. Which conflict example is this? Correct. It is a man versus himself. Miguel is not fighting against anyone else. He is battling his own doubts and his own fears. This is when the real struggle happens inside a person's mind or heart. Okay, next one, let us have number 4. A virus invaded Aaron's computer. He can't retrieve it, even after reformatting it. He also forgot to back up all of his documents. Now, which conflict example is that? Alright, it is a man versus technology. This shows that people can sometimes struggle against technology when our own creation cause problems we can't easily control. Next, number 5. In the early 1990s, in the Philippines, a young girl decided to pursue college education, despite her family and community insisting that it wasn't a proper path for her. What conflict is present in this situation? Very good. It's man versus society. Because in the early 1990s, during the American period, Filipinos believed that women should stay at home instead of going to college. But this brave girl challenged that belief. She wanted to study and follow her dreams even when others told her she could not. Okay? Today, women in the Philippines can choose their own careers and achieve their own goals, thanks to those who stood up for equality in the past. Alright, great job, class. So, it seems like you were able to understood our lesson for today. Thank you so much for participating and for listening. For now, you have your individual activity. You have to choose one problem mentioned and provide at least 3 solution or 3 possible solution to deal with the problem. You have to write it down on a one whole sheet of paper. So for example, you choose man versus man, and the problem is 2 friends are upset because they both want to be captain of the basketball team. And the possible solutions are, number 1, they could take turns being the captain for different games. Number 2, they could agree to share leadership, duties, and support each other. And number 3, they could ask the coach to help decide fairly, maybe by holding a vote or a skill test. So I have here 5 different conflict: man versus man versus nature, man versus society, man versus technology, and man versus himself. You only have to choose one problem and provide 3 possible solutions. Okay, so great job for today, class. We already learned what a conflict is, and you did an amazing job. Now that we understand these elements, it's time for us to move forward. So make sure to follow along in our next video. Don't forget to like this video, follow, and if you can, subscribe so you won't miss our next lesson. See you there!